Have you ever noticed how a single moment, just one breath, can completely rewrite your entire life story? When Caspian Thorne Beaumont plunged into those dark, churning waters, his expensive watch still gleaming on his wrist, he had exactly 90 seconds before his lungs would fill and his consciousness would fade. But in that same instant, Leora Hayes, the daughter of the estate's cleaning staff, made a choice that would shatter the invisible walls between their worlds forever. Money can buy mansions. It can purchase yachts and designer suits. But it can't buy courage. And on that fateful night, all of Caspian's millions couldn't save him from the cold embrace of the ocean. Only Leora could. Let me ask you something. Have you ever witnessed someone in genuine danger? That gut-wrenching moment when your body freezes but your mind races? What did you do? Did you step forward or step back? Most people hesitate. It's human nature. But some rare souls move without thinking, risking everything for someone they barely know. What makes this story even more extraordinary is what happened before the drowning. Because Leora wasn't just any employee's daughter. She was invisible to the wealthy guests who strolled through those marble hallways. The kind of person the rich pretend not to see while she quietly dusts their priceless artifacts. Yet when everyone else stood paralyzed, the millionaires, the socialites, the people born with silver spoons, it was a janitor's daughter who dove into those merciless waves. Before I continue, drop your location and the time you're watching this in the comments. I'm curious to know where my Soul Thread family is tuning in from today. Now, you might think this is simply a story about a heroic rescue, a moment of bravery that earned Leora a thank you card and perhaps a generous tip from the Beaumont family. It's not. This is about what happens when two people from completely different universes collide, when wealth meets worth, when privilege confronts passion. Because after Leora pulled Caspian from those waters, gasping and trembling, something changed between them, something neither family was prepared for. The Beaumonts had weathered financial crashes, political scandals, and social upheavals across generations. But they had never faced anything like Leora Hayes, a young woman whose courage would expose the hollow core of their gilded existence. If you're not ready to question everything you believe about love, power, and what truly matters in life, you might want to click away now. But if you stay, I promise you'll never look at wealth and social status the same way again. Because sometimes, the people society values least are the ones who possess the greatest wealth of all, a wealth no bank can measure. Beaumont Manor wasn't just a home. It was a monument. 42 rooms of meticulous architectural perfection perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. Every morning, Caspian woke to the sound of waves crashing against jagged rocks 300 feet below his bedroom window. A sound of freedom that mocked him from behind custom-crafted glass that cost more than most people's cars. At 28, Caspian Thorne Beaumont possessed everything money could buy and nothing his heart actually wanted. Your great-grandfather built this estate from nothing. Victor would remind him during their mandatory Sunday brunches on the East Terrace. The Beaumont name opens doors that remain closed to 99% of the population. Victor never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His disappointment cut deeper than any shout could. Behind the hand-carved mahogany doors of his private wing, Caspian maintained a secret that would make his father's perfect posture crumble. A room that officially appeared on the manor blueprints as Storage 7B, but had, over 4 years, transformed into a paint-splattered sanctuary. Canvas after canvas lined the walls. Not the acceptable landscapes or still-life compositions that decorated the main house, but raw, emotional pieces that bled with color and meaning. Hands reaching through prison bars made of gold. A man drowning in champagne. A bird with clipped wings perched on a diamond-studded cage. You were 20 minutes late to the Morrison acquisition dinner, his father said one evening, not looking up from his Wall Street Journal. Charles Morrison mentioned it. Twice. Caspian's fingers, still bearing traces of cadmium yellow under the nails despite his thorough scrubbing, tightened around his whiskey glass. The traffic was perfectly fine. I checked. Victor finally looked up, his steel gray eyes cataloging every imperfection in his son's appearance. Your responsibility isn't just to yourself, Caspian. Every Beaumont man for 6 generations has understood that. What Victor didn't understand, couldn't comprehend, was that Caspian had begun to question whether the Beaumont legacy was worth preserving at all. The household staff moved like shadows through the halls, trained to be invisible and less needed. All except Mrs. Hayes, who'd been cleaning the manor since before Caspian was born. She alone seemed immune to the Beaumont intimidation, meeting Victor's gaze directly when he spoke to her. One Tuesday, she caught Caspian exiting his studio, a streak of ultramarine blue forgotten on his forearm. "My daughter used to paint," she said simply, nodding toward the telltale mark. No judgment in her voice, just acknowledgement. Caspian froze. "I'd appreciate your discretion." Mrs. Hayes nodded once. "Not my secret to tell." She paused, though sometimes I wonder why it needs to be a secret at all. That night, Victor summoned Caspian to his study, a room designed to intimidate with its 15-foot ceilings and walls lined with the bound leather spines of books no one ever read. "The board has unanimously approved your appointment as executive vice president," Victor announced, sliding a contract across his desk, the same desk where his father had signed papers that changed the economic landscape of 3 states. The golden handcuffs were tightening. "I haven't accepted the position yet," Caspian said, the words escaping before he could swallow them back. Victor's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "The announcement goes out tomorrow morning. Your grandfather will be flying in for the press conference." That night, alone in his studio, Caspian painted with a feverish intensity. The face taking shape on his canvas wasn't his father's, but his own, hollow-eyed, smiling the empty smile he perfected for galas and board meetings. A perfect Beaumont air with nothing behind his eyes. 3 paintings and 5 hours later, as dawn broke over the Atlantic, Caspian made a decision. He would attend the press conference. He would smile for the cameras. He would shake the hands of board members who'd watched him grow up. And then he would begin dismantling his cage, one golden bar at a time. What Caspian couldn't know was that fate had already set in motion events that would shatter his cage completely. Beginning with a chance encounter in the manor's centuries-old library with a young woman whose eyes held no reverence for the Beaumont name. A woman who would soon risk her life to save his. For miles and a universe away from Beaumont Manor, Leora Hayes woke each morning to the rhythmic rattle of the 5:15 train. Her window faced the elevated tracks where, twice an hour, steel wheels ground against steel rails, shaking the foundation of their 2-bedroom apartment in Eastbridge. Leora didn't mind. That first morning train meant it was time to rise. Unlike the Beaumont spacious manor, the Hayes apartment operated with military precision, not from privilege but necessity. The bathroom schedule was non-negotiable. Leora at 5:20, her mother at 5:35, breakfast together at 5:50, out the door by 6:10 to catch the 6:17 bus that would deliver them to the service entrance of Beaumont Manor by 7 o'clock sharp. "You're quiet this morning," Marianne Hayes noted, watching her daughter stir honey into her tea. At 45, Marianne's hands bore the marks of 2 decades of chemical cleaners and hot water. Red, cracked knuckles that no amount of drugstore lotion could fully heal. "Just thinking about that new book I started," Leora replied, her mind still caught in the pages she'd read until 2 a.m. "The protagonist reminds me of you. Strong and devastatingly beautiful?" Marianne joked, flexing a bicep developed from years of scrubbing marble floors. "Unstoppable," Leora corrected, smiling at the woman who'd raised her alone after Leora's father walked out 19 years ago. What Leora didn't mention was that she'd been writing again. Her battered notebook, purchased from a thrift store for 50 cents, contained more than just diary entries. Between its covers grew a world where women like her mother were recognized as the warriors they were, where people weren't defined by the neighborhoods they came from or the jobs they worked. The 6:17 bus was crowded as always. Leora pressed against a window, notebook balanced on her knees, adding lines to her latest piece while her mother chatted with other household staff members. The invisible army that kept places like Beaumont Manor functioning. Mrs. Beaumont wants the library completely reorganized, Mrs. Winters, the head housekeeper, announced as they filed through the service entrance. Apparently, some rare book collector is visiting next week. Leora's heart quickened. The library, 3 stories of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes worth more than her entire apartment building, was her secret haven. On lunch breaks, she'd slip inside, running her fingers along leather-bound spines, occasionally daring to read a few pages from books whose authors have been dead for centuries. "I can help with that," Leora offered quickly. Mrs. Winters raised an eyebrow. "You'll be assisting your mother with the East Wing bathrooms today. The library needs careful handling." The dismissal stung, but Leora nodded. She understood her place in the hierarchy of Beaumont Manor. Kitchen staff, groundskeepers, maintenance workers, housekeepers, everyone knew their boundaries. The Beaumont preferred their staff to be efficient and invisible. That afternoon, as Leora polished the intricate fixtures of the guest bathroom, she overheard Victor Beaumont in the hallway. "The girl clearly lacks the necessary qualifications," he was saying to someone. "A community college education is hardly sufficient for a position at Beaumont Financial." Leora froze, cloth in hand. She wasn't meant to hear this conversation. "But her recommendations are excellent," replied a voice she didn't recognize. "And diversity initiatives. Our public relations strategies, not hiring policies." Victor cut in. "Find someone suitable." The voices moved away, but the conversation lingered in Leora's mind as she finished her work. She wasn't naive. She knew the world operated on connections, pedigrees, and advantages she'd never possess. Yet something in her refused to accept that reality as immutable. That evening, after her mother had fallen asleep in front of their second-hand television, Leora returned to her notebook. Her pen moved across the page with newfound determination, crafting a story about a young woman who infiltrated a wealthy family's inner circle. Not through deception or romance, but through sheer, unstoppable competence. The clock read 1:27 a.m. when Leora finally closed her notebook. Tomorrow would arrive too soon, with its bus schedule and cleaning roster. But for those hours, hunched over words that no one else might ever read, she had carved out a space where expectations and limitations couldn't reach her. What she couldn't know was that in just 3 days, the carefully maintained boundaries between her world and the Beaumonts would collapse completely, beginning in the very library she longed to explore. 3 days later, Mrs. Winters caught a stomach bug that tore through the staff quarters. With 4 housekeepers down, the careful scheduling collapsed, and Leora found herself reassigned to the library. "Don't touch anything you don't absolutely need to," Mrs. Winters warned through a phone call, her voice weak. "Just dust the lower shelves and vacuum between the reading areas. The valuable collections are locked anyway." What Mrs. Winters didn't know was that Leora had memorized the library's layout during her lunch breaks. She knew which chair had the best reading light, which floor creaked near the mythology section, and which window seat offered a perfect view of the ocean while remaining hidden from the main entrance. What she didn't expect was to find Caspian Beaumont already occupying that window seat at 2:13 p.m. on a Thursday. He didn't notice her at first. He sat with his back to the door, a leather-bound volume open in his hands, completely absorbed. Leora considered retreating silently. Staff were supposed to work around the family, not disturb them. But something held her in place. The afternoon light caught the edges of his profile, and for a moment, he looked nothing like the stiff, formal man she glimpsed at staff meetings. This Caspian was different. Shoulders relaxed, focus intense, completely present in a way she'd never witnessed in any of the Beaumonts. Then he sensed her presence and turned. Their eyes met across 40 feet of antique Persian carpet. "I'm sorry," Leora said immediately, hand tightening on her cleaning cart. "I can come back later." Caspian closed his book, not with the sharp snap of someone annoyed at being interrupted, but slowly, as if reluctant to break his connection to the page. "No need. I was just..." He glanced down at the book, then back at her. "Actually, perhaps you can help me." The request so surprised Leora that she momentarily forgot her place. With what? Finding the second volume of this. He held up the book, a collection of early modernist poetry she'd noticed on previous visits. It should be nearby, but the cataloging system here is unique. Third shelf from the bottom, 14 books from the right. Leora answered without thinking. Caspian's eyebrows rose. You know the library catalog? I noticed things. A moment of silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but charged with mutual assessment. So, do I, he said finally, rising from the window seat. As he moved toward the shelf she'd indicated, his sleeve caught the edge of her cart, knocking her notebook to the floor. It fell open, pages exposed. Before she could grab it, Caspian bent down and retrieved it. His eyes fell on the open page, on words she'd written at 1 a.m. about worlds colliding and barriers breaking. He read a single line before she reached for it. You wrote this? He asked, voice carefully neutral but eyes alive with genuine interest. It's nothing, Leora said, tucking the notebook under her arm. Just thoughts. Caspian studied her face. All traces of the bored air vanished. They're not nothing. The moment hung suspended between them, a recognition that transcended their prescribed roles. Had you ever felt that unexplainable connection with someone? That instant when masks fall away and you see a person, really see them for the first time? Drop a comment below if you've experienced that rare moment of genuine recognition. For Leora and Caspian, that library encounter lasted exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Neither could have predicted how those precious minutes would alter the trajectory of their lives, setting them on a collision course that would culminate on the deck of a yacht under a sky full of indifferent stars. 2 weeks after their library encounter, the Sterling Dream, the Beaumont family's 180-foot superyacht, gleamed against the deep blue harbor waters. Tonight marked the annual Beaumont Foundation Gala, where the elite gathered to congratulate themselves on their philanthropy while drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than Leora earned in a day. The yacht itself was a floating monument to excess. 3 decks of polished teak and gleaming chrome, a glass-bottomed swimming pool suspended over the ocean, a helipad that doubled as a dance floor under the stars. Every surface meticulously maintained to reflect the wealth it represented. Leora hadn't planned to work the event, but when Elena from the catering staff called in sick, Mrs. Winters had asked Marianne if her daughter could fill in. Keep your head down, hands steady, and remember, you're there to serve, not be seen. Her mother reminded as Leora donned the required uniform. Crisp white shirt, black pants, black bow tie. I know how to be invisible, Leora replied, tucking her hair into a tight bun. What she didn't say was that she'd been watching for Caspian since their library meeting, that she'd taken extra shifts near his wing of the manor, that she'd reread the poetry collection he'd been holding, wondering what words had captured his attention. By 9 p.m., the Sterling Dream throbbed with carefully orchestrated opulence. String quartet on the main deck, Michelin-starred chef in the galley, diamond-draped guests whose collective net worth could solve homelessness in 3 states. Leora moved among them like a ghost, tray balanced on her palm, eyes properly lowered. She spotted Caspian immediately, impossible not to in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, glass of untouched champagne in hand, as he nodded mechanically at whatever the senator's wife was saying. His smile never reached his eyes. At 10:47 p.m., she noticed him slip away from the crowd, heading toward the upper deck. His shoulders dropped the moment he escaped the party's orbit, tension visibly leaving his body with each step. Leora continued her rounds, collecting empty glasses, until Mrs. Winters approached. Take these champagne flutes to the washing station, then check the upper deck for empties, she instructed. Some guests have wandered up there. The upper deck was deserted except for a solitary figure at the far railing. Caspian stood alone, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, staring into the black water 30 feet below. The wind had picked up, whipping his usually perfect hair across his forehead. Leora hesitated, tray in hand. He looked different, raw. Something in his posture spoke of a decision being made. He didn't hear her approach over the wind and waves. As she opened her mouth to announce her presence, the Sterling Dream hit an unexpected swell. The yacht lurched violently to starboard. Caspian, leaning against the railing, lost his balance. His arms windmilled for a heartbeat, his body tipping beyond the point of recovery. Then he was gone. The splash was lost in the wind. Only Leora saw him fall. For one frozen second, she stood paralyzed. Then training kicked in, not from her job, but from summers as a lifeguard at Eastbridge Community Pool during high school. She kicked off her shoes, dropped her tray with a crash, and ran to the railing. Below, a white shirt appeared briefly in the churning wake before disappearing again. Leora didn't hesitate. She climbed onto the railing and dove. The shock of cold water stole her breath. Salt burned her eyes as she forced them open in the darkness. Nothing, just black water and the distant glow of the yacht's lights cutting through the depths. Her lungs screamed for air. She surfaced, gasped, and dove again. On her third attempt, her outstretched fingers brushed fabric. She grabbed blindly, connecting with an arm. Caspian was limp, a dead weight pulling them both deeper. Panic clawed at her chest, not for herself but for him. How long had he been under? 60 seconds? 90? She kicked harder than she'd ever kicked before, one arm locked around his chest, the other fighting against the water. The yacht's light seemed impossibly distant above them. His weight was dragging them down. But Leora Hayes, daughter of a woman who'd scrubbed floors for 20 years without complaint, knew something about refusing to surrender. She broke the surface with a desperate gasp, pulling Caspian's face above water. He wasn't breathing. Help! Her scream cut through the night. Man overboard. The yacht seemed miles away now, carried by the current. Leora tightened her grip on Caspian's unconscious form, using every ounce of strength to keep his face above water while fighting the waves that threatened to separate them. A spotlight suddenly cut through the darkness. Voices shouted. A lifeboat appeared, bobbing toward them. "Hold on," someone called. Leora's muscles burned with exhaustion, but she refused to let go. As hands reached down from the lifeboat, she used her last reserves of strength to push Caspian upward into their grasp. Only when they had him safely aboard did she allow herself to be pulled from the water. In the lifeboat, she pushed past the crewman attempting CPR. "I'm certified," she gasped, still fighting for breath herself. She positioned her hands on Caspian's chest and began compressions, counting silently, willing his heart to respond. 1 minute passed, the longest minute of her life. Then Caspian convulsed, water spewing from his mouth as he gasped for air. His eyes flew open, wild and disoriented, locking onto Leora's face as she bent over him. Recognition flickered in his gaze, not of her position or their vastly different worlds, but of her, simply her. "You," he whispered through blue-tinged lips. And in that single word, both their lives changed forever. Fluorescent lights hum overhead as Leora sat in emergency room waiting area, still wearing the hospital-issued scrubs they'd given her after confiscating her soaked uniform. Her skin felt raw from the salt water, her muscles ached, and her mother's worried text remained unanswered. Her phone ruined by the ocean. 3 hours had passed since the Sterling Dream docked and paramedics rushed Caspian away. No one had told her anything. No one had even acknowledged her existence since a nurse handed her a foam cup of lukewarm coffee. "Ms. Hayes?" She looked up to find a tall man in an expensive suit. Not a doctor, definitely not staff. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes assessed her like a problem requiring solution. "Mr. Beaumont asked to see you." For a moment, she thought he meant Victor. Then she realized Caspian was awake. The private hospital suite occupied the entire top floor of the East Wing. 2 security guards flanked the entrance. The suit-wearing man nodded, and they stepped aside. Inside, monitors beeped steadily. Caspian lay propped against pillows, his normally tan face pale, dark circles beneath his eyes, and 4 snaked into his arm. Despite everything, he looked up when she entered, and something in his expression shifted. "You disappeared," he said, voice raspy from the salt water he'd swallowed. "They wouldn't tell me where you were." Leora remained by the door, suddenly aware of her borrowed scrubs and tangled hair. "I'm fine. How are you feeling?" A weak smile touched his lips. "Like I got hit by a truck. The doctor says without immediate CPR, I would have..." He didn't finish the sentence. "You saved my life." The weight of those words hung between them. Anyone would have... "No," he interrupted, strength returning to his voice. "They wouldn't." No one else even noticed I was gone. His eyes held hers. "Why did you jump?" The question caught her off guard. Not, "Thank you," or "I'm grateful," but "Why?" "Because you were drowning," she answered simply. His laugh was brief and painful. "I've been drowning for years. You're the first person who noticed." The door opened before she could respond. Victor Beaumont entered, followed by a doctor and 2 more men in suits. Victor barely glanced at Leora. "The press is contained for now, but we need to get ahead of this." He turned to the doctor. "When can he be moved?" The doctor hesitated. "Mr. Beaumont needs rest and observation. Near drowning can have delayed complications. We have private medical staff at this state." Victor cut in. Throughout this exchange, Caspian kept his eyes on Leora, as if drawing strength from her presence. "Father," he said finally, "this is Leora Hayes. She pulled me from the water and performed CPR until I started breathing again." Victor turned, truly seeing her for the first time. His assessment was swift and dismissive. "Yes, the foundation will ensure she's properly compensated." "Compensated?" Caspian's voice hardened. "She saved my life." "And we're grateful," Victor replied smoothly. "Now, Ms. Hayes must be exhausted. James will arrange transportation home for her. If you believe heroism knows no social class and should never be dismissed, give this video a thumbs up right now." "I don't want compensation," Leora said, finding her voice. "I don't want anything." "Everyone wants something," Victor responded, not unkindly, just stating what he believed was an immutable fact. Caspian's monitors beeped faster. "I want her to stay." The room fell silent. Victor's expression didn't change, but temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "As you wish," he said finally. "For now." What no one in that sterile hospital room could have predicted was that "for now" would stretch into hours, then days, creating a bridge between worlds that neither family was prepared to accept. 3 weeks after the accident, Caspian was discharged from the hospital and returned to Beaumont Manor. The official story, carefully crafted by Victor's PR team, described a heroic rescue by estate staff after an unfortunate incident. Leora's name never appeared in any press release. Yet within the manor walls, whispers followed her everywhere. Staff who had previously ignored her now watched with curious eyes. Mrs. Winters assigned her to wings far from Caspian's quarters. "It's for the best," her mother advised over breakfast. "That family lives in a different world." But Leora couldn't forget the way Caspian had looked at her in the hospital, like she was the only person who truly saw him. The note arrived on her 4th day back at work, tucked inside a copy of the poetry book from the library, left on a shelf she was scheduled to dust. "Storage room 7B, 8 p.m. If you want to." She knew she shouldn't go, knew the professional boundaries she'd be crossing, knew the impossible distance between their worlds. At 8:07 p.m., she knocked softly on the unmarked door in the manor's east wing. The room beyond wasn't storage space at all. Canvases lined the walls, vivid, emotional paintings nothing like the formal portraits hanging throughout the mansion. In the center stood Caspian, paint-splattered jeans replacing his usual tailored attire. "You came," he said simply. "What is this place?" Leora asked, stepping inside and closing the door. "The real me?" He gestured at the artwork surrounding them. "No one else has ever been here." That night, they talked until midnight about his painting, her writing, the suffocating expectations they both faced from opposite ends of the social spectrum. As she rose to leave, he gently took her hand. "Will you come back tomorrow?" She did, and the night after, and the night after that. Their 7th meeting changed everything. Leora arrived to find the studio transformed. Floor cushions arranged before a small projector, showing black and white films against the back wall. Italian neo-realism, Caspian explained, watching her reaction. Art that changed how people saw the world. They sat side by side, shoulders touching as the film played. When his hand found hers in the darkness, neither acknowledged it aloud, but their fingers intertwined with quiet certainty. By their 12th meeting, the pretense of casual friendship had evaporated. Caspian was telling her about a particularly brutal argument with his father when Leora reached up to brush a strand of hair from his forehead. His words stopped, the air between them charged with unspoken longing. "I haven't stopped thinking about you," he admitted, voice low and rough. "Not since that day in the library. Not for a single moment." Leora's heart hammered against her ribs. "This can't work," she whispered, even as she moved closer. "Your world. I don't want that world. I never did." His hand traced the curve of her cheek, thumb brushing across her lower lip with a reverence that made her breath catch. When their lips finally met, it was like the culmination of 1,000 unspoken conversations. The kiss deepened, tentative exploration giving way to hungry certainty. His hands tangled in her hair as hers gripped the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer until there was no space left between them. They sank down onto the cushions, wrapped in each other's arms. Each touch burned away another barrier between them. His lips trailing fire down her neck, her fingers mapping the contours of his shoulders. Clothing became an unwelcome obstacle, shed piece by piece until they lay skin against skin, hearts beating in tandem. In the soft glow of the studio lights, they moved together like artists creating something beautiful and fleeting. His whispered words against her skin felt like poetry, her gasps and sighs a melody only he could evoke. Time suspended as they discovered each other completely, their bodies expressing what words couldn't contain, desire and tenderness merging into something transcendent. Afterward, they lay entwined, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns along her spine. "I've never felt like this," he confessed into the quiet darkness. "Like I'm finally seeing in color after a lifetime of black and white." 3 nights later, disaster nearly struck. They were in the studio, Leora modeling for a portrait Caspian couldn't stop himself from painting, when footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. "Caspian," Victor's voice called. "The investors are waiting." They froze. The doorknob turned, locked, thankfully, followed by an impatient knock. "One moment," Caspian called, voice impressively steady as he motioned Leora toward the storage closet at the back of the studio. She slipped inside, heart pounding, as Caspian grabbed a paint-stained smock to cover himself and opened the door just enough to speak to his father. "I lost track of time," he apologized. "I'll be right down." Through the closet's slatted door, Leora could see Victor's attempt to peer into the studio. "Is someone in there with you?" he asked, suspicion evident. "Just me and my failures," Caspian replied, gesturing at a canvas he deliberately slashed earlier that week during a moment of frustration. Victor's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. 5 minutes. The Morgans don't like to be kept waiting. After he left, Leora emerged from the closet, adrenaline making her hands shake. That was close. Too close, Caspian agreed, pulling her into his arms. "I'm tired of hiding, Leora. I'm tired of pretending you don't matter." "What are you saying?" His eyes held a determination she hadn't seen before. "I'm saying I want more than stolen moments. I want a life, a real life with you in it." The stakes had just risen exponentially. Both knew that what had begun as a secret romance had evolved into something neither could walk away from, something worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Their secret lasted exactly 43 more days. The exposure came not from Victor's suspicions or a nosy staff member, but from the most mundane source imaginable, Caspian's phone. During a board meeting, his screen lit up with a text from Leora, displayed for the 3 seconds needed for the board member beside him to read. I'm still feeling you on my skin from last night. By evening, the whispers had reached Victor. By morning, they'd reached Mrs. Hayes. Leora was arranging fresh towels in the East Wing guest bathroom when her mother appeared in the doorway, face ashen. Tell me it isn't true, she said without preamble. The towel in Leora's hands suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. Mom, Mrs. Winters just informed me that my position here is under review because my daughter is sleeping with the owner's son. Her mother's voice cracked. 20 years I've worked here. 20 years of spotless service. The guilt hit Leora like a physical blow. In her bubble of new love, she'd never considered how her actions might affect her mother's livelihood. Across the estate, in Victor's private study, a parallel conversation unfolded with considerably more volume. Do you have any concept of what you've done? Victor demanded, pacing before the massive mahogany desk. The Morgan merger is hanging by a thread, and now this scandal. It's not a scandal, Caspian interrupted. I care about her. Victor stopped pacing. Care about her? She's the help, Caspian. She saved my life when every one of your wealthy friends just stood there watching me drown. And you repaid that debt with your body? Victor's voice dripped with disgust. How generous. Caspian's hands curled into fists. Don't you dare reduce what we have to something tawdry. What you have is a fantasy, Victor said, his voice suddenly calm, which was infinitely more dangerous than his anger. One that ends today. The ultimatum arrived with cold precision. End the relationship immediately, or Victor would not only fire Mrs. Hayes, but ensure she'd never work in any wealthy household again. The estate's legal team had already drafted documents claiming theft of family heirlooms, documents that would remain unfiled if Caspian complied. That night, Leora waited in the studio for 3 hours. Caspian never came. In Eastbridge, the news spread to the apartment complex like wildfire. Neighbors who had barely acknowledged the Hayes family now stopped Leora in the hallway, hungry for details. Is it true he's buying you an apartment in the city? I heard he proposed with his grandmother's ring. My cousin works at the hospital, said he was asking for you every 5 minutes. The speculation morphed from admiration to resentment with breathtaking speed. At the bus stop, Mrs. Delaney, who'd lived next door for 15 years, pointedly moved her purse to the other side when Leora sat down. Getting above yourself never ends well, she remarked to no one in particular. For 5 days, Caspian and Leora existed in painful orbit around each other at this state. She'd glimpse him across crowded rooms, his face a mask of control. He'd turn a corner and find her polishing a banister, her eyes immediately dropping to the floor. On the 6th day, Leora found an envelope slipped under their apartment door. Inside, a check for $250,000 and a note in Victor's handwriting. For your discretion and departure. She burned the check and spent the night crying in her mother's arms. The breaking point came in the most public way possible. The annual staff appreciation luncheon, a tradition Victor maintained more for appearances than genuine gratitude, was held on the Manor's south lawn. All employees, from groundskeepers to Victor's personal assistant, gathered under a white tent for lukewarm pasta and generic recognition. Leora had decided to resign, sparing her mother the humiliation of being fired. She'd just handed her resignation letter to Mrs. Winters when Caspian appeared at the tent entrance. The buzz of conversation died instantly. He walked directly to Leora, ignoring the shocked faces surrounding them. I tried to stay away, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I told myself it was for your own good. Mrs. Winters stepped forward. Mr. Beaumont, this is hardly the place. It's exactly the place. He cut her off, eyes never leaving Leora's face. Because I want witnesses when I tell you that my father threatened your mother's job, your reputation, and my inheritance. Gasps rippled through the crowd. And I want witnesses when I tell you none of that matters to me. He took her hands in his. The only thing I can't bear to lose is you. From a Manor's terrace, Victor watched the scene unfold with ice-cold fury, already reaching for his phone to set consequences in motion that would alter both families forever. Victor's retribution was swift and absolute. By sunset, security escorts removed Marianne and Leora Hayes from Beaumont Manor grounds. By midnight, their apartment building's management delivered an eviction notice. The building, they discovered, was owned by a Beaumont subsidiary. By morning, Marianne's bank account was frozen due to a fraud investigation. Caspian discovered these developments when he tried to call Leora and found her number disconnected. His father had confiscated his phone, frozen his personal accounts, and stationed security outside his wing of the manor. Not officially prisoners, just protection during this difficult time. You have two choices. Victor informed him over breakfast, calmly spreading marmalade on toast. End this embarrassing episode and assume your rightful position at Beaumont Financial, or continue this rebellion and lose everything. Your inheritance, your name, your future. For the first time, Caspian looked at his father and felt nothing but pity. "You still don't understand," he said quietly. "I've spent my entire life imprisoned by your expectations. Leora was the first person who saw me, not the Beaumont heir, just me." Victor's expression remained unmoved. Sentiment fades. Legacy endures. "Not always," Caspian replied, standing to leave. "Grandfather told me something before he died. He said his greatest regret wasn't any business decision. It was forcing his brother to choose between family and the woman he loved. A woman you never knew existed because he chose duty over happiness." Victor's hand froze, the knife hovering over his toast. "That's not true. Her name was Eleanor. She was a receptionist at the downtown office in 1962. Caspian watched the color drain from his father's face. "You have an uncle living in Seattle who's never contacted us because your father made the choice you're demanding I make." That night, Caspian used the one asset Victor couldn't touch, his grandfather's vintage Aston Martin, legally titled in Caspian's name as a 21st birthday gift. He drove to the only place he could think to find Leora, her cousin's apartment in Westridge, mentioned once during their late-night conversations. 3 hours of searching led him to a rundown building with broken security doors. In apartment 4C, he found Leora and her mother sharing a pull-out sofa bed. Marianne's face hardened when she saw him. "Haven't you done enough?" But Leora stepped forward. "Let him speak, Mom." "I made a mistake," Caspian said, his voice raw. "Not loving you. That's the only thing I've done right. My mistake was believing I could navigate my father's world while keeping you safe in it. And now," Leora asked, arms crossed protectively over her chest. From his pocket, Caspian withdrew a small key. "This opens a safety deposit box at First National. Inside are the deed to property in my name and enough cash to live on for a year." He placed it in her palm, closing her fingers around it. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to meet me there tomorrow at noon." "Why not now?" she asked. "Because I have one last thing to do." At exactly 11:58 the next day, Caspian parked the Aston Martin outside a modest cottage overlooking the bay. The first property he purchased with his trust fund money at 25, the only asset Victor couldn't touch, the only place he'd ever felt truly at peace. When Leora's taxi pulled up at 12:04, he was waiting on the porch steps. "Before you decide anything," he said as she approached, "you should know what I've done." He handed her his phone, open to a press release draft. Beaumont Air launches independent foundation, cites moral differences with family company. "I've liquidated my personal portfolio, about $8 million. Not billions like my father, but enough to start something meaningful. Something ours." Leora stared at the screen, then at him. "You're walking away from everything?" "No," he said, taking her hands. "I'm walking toward everything that matters. If you believe love should triumph over social barriers and that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in courage, hit that subscribe button right now." "What about my mother?" Leora asked, practical even in this emotional moment. Caspian smiled. "The foundation needs an operations director. someone with 20 years of experience managing complex logistics and demanding personalities. For the first time in weeks, Leora laughed, a sound more valuable to Caspian than all the Beaumont millions. "We might fail," she warned. "Then we'll fail together," he replied. "That's still richer than succeeding alone." 18 months transformed the modest bayfront cottage into something extraordinary, not because of expensive renovations or luxury additions. Caspian and Leora had devoted their resources elsewhere, but because of what bloomed within those walls. The sunroom became Caspian's studio, filled with natural light and the scent of oil paints. The small bedroom overlooking the water transformed into Leora's writing space, her once battered notebook replaced by a proper desk where her words flowed freely. Between these creative spaces, they built a life neither had dared imagine. The Beaumont Hayes Foundation launched with little fanfare, but ambitious goals. Arts education for underprivileged communities, emergency service worker support programs, and scholarship funds for domestic workers' children. Mary Ann Hayes, initially skeptical, proved remarkably adept at translating her household management skills to nonprofit operations. "You're actually happy cleaning other people's toilets?" One foundation donor asked her at their first fundraising event, clearly baffled. "I was never happy cleaning toilets," Marianne corrected. "I was proud of supporting my daughter. There's a difference." Caspian's art, once hidden in Storage Room 7B, found its way to a small gallery in the Arts District. It is raw, emotional pieces, particularly a series titled Drowning/Breathing, depicting his accident and rescue, resonated with critics and collectors alike. Beaumont heir reject's family fortune finds artistic success, read one headline. Former janitor's daughter publishes award-winning essay collection, read another. When Leora's writings about class, sacrifice, and transformation caught a publisher's attention, their story traveled further than they did, inspiring unexpected ripples. A billionaire tech CEO established a foundation matching employee donations to social justice causes. A prestigious university revised its financial aid policies after a board member attended a Beaumont Hayes Foundation event. 3 wealthy families in the region publicly committed to paying their domestic staff living wages with health benefits. Not everyone celebrated their choices. Victor maintained a frigid silence, communicating only through attorneys. Some former Beaumont associates whispered that Caspian had suffered a psychological break after his near drowning. Certain Eastbridge neighbors suggested Leora had trapped a wealthy man, despite her own growing success. The couple learned to find humor in the criticism. Apparently, I'm both a gold digger and a communist revolutionary, Leora joked one evening, reading online comments about her latest essay. Meanwhile, I'm both mentally unstable and a calculating tax evader, Caspian replied, kissing her forehead. On the anniversary of the yacht accident, they hosted a small gathering at the cottage. Mrs. Winters came, having quit the Beaumont household after 30 years. So did Caspian's childhood nanny, 3 foundation scholarship recipients, and the paramedic who'd been on duty the night of the rescue. Noticeably absent, Victor Beaumont, though an invitation had been sent. As twilight settled over the bay, Caspian raised a glass to the assembled guests. To unlikely rescues, he said, eyes finding Leora's, and to the courage to build something new. That night, after everyone left, Leora found Caspian standing at the water's edge, staring out at the darkened bay. "Any regrets?" she asked, slipping her arm around his waist. He pulled her closer. "Only that I didn't jump sooner. I want to ask you something important. If this story moved you, if you believe people should be valued for their character rather than their bank accounts, you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Only someone who thinks money matters more than human connection would watch this story and not support these messages. Show me you're not that person by hitting subscribe and sharing this video with someone whose heart needs this reminder." 5 years to the day after Caspian fell from the Sterling dream, an unexpected letter arrived at the cottage. The Beaumont family crest adorned the envelope, but the handwriting wasn't Victor's. Inside was a newspaper clipping. Victor Beaumont announcing his retirement, and a short note, some legacies need to end for new ones to begin. That evening, Caspian and Leora walked the shoreline as the sun dipped below the horizon. The same waters that had nearly claimed his life, now peaceful beneath an amber sky. Do you ever think about how close we came to never having this? Leora asked, their fingers intertwined as they watched the tide retreat. Every day, he answered. One moment separated everything I was from everything I became. There's a profound truth hidden in their story, one I hope you'll carry with you long after this video ends. Sometimes what looks like drowning is actually the universe forcing you to swim in a new direction. Sometimes the hand that pulls you from the depth belongs to the person who will help you breathe more freely than you ever thought possible. We're all standing at the railing of our own private yachts, peering into waters that terrify us. The real question is, will you recognize your rescuer when they appear? Will you have the courage to build something authentic, even when the whole world tells you it's impossible? Caspian and Leora's story reminds us that the most important saving happens long after the water leaves your lungs, when you find the courage to rescue yourself from a life that's slowly suffocating you. Remember how we began? With a split-second choice that rewrote two lives forever? That moment is available to each of us every single day. The only question is, are you brave enough to jump?